April 1945, Bavaria. The war was ending the way storms end. Quiet first, damage after. In a low wooden barracks, 3 women stood very still and listened to the ground shake. Engines, boots, English voices. Greta Weber, 23 now, 19 when they took her, stepped in front of the younger girls without thinking. A hand shielding a candle. They had learned what liberation could mean when it arrived with bayonets. The same nightmare under new masters. The door handle scraped. Sunlight split the room. An American officer filled the doorway. Looked at their faces, rigid schoolteacher, trembling orphan. Greta's practiced stillness and then did something almost impossible. He didn't cross the threshold. His German was careful, as if the words might break. "We're not going to hurt you. You're safe now." No laughter. No barked command. A folded blanket passed across the air. Clean wool that smelled of soap, not sweat. A typed sheet went on the wall, black letters in their language. No prisoner will be sexually assaulted or harmed. No soldier may enter without permission. Meals at 800, 1200, 1800. You are not required to earn them. Greta waited for the price that always followed kindness. None came, hands stayed visible. Boots stayed outside. After 4 years of learning exactly what men in uniforms wanted, the shock was this. The Americans didn't even touch them. The air still tasted of ash in April. Greta kept her feet where the floor felt most solid and tried not to remember the last time a door had opened without knocking. The officer had stepped back after posting the rules, as if the open strip between the threshold and their cots belonged to the women, not to him. Such a small thing, a line of floor left untouched, yet her body kept returning to it the way a tongue searches the place where a tooth once was. Liesel's hands would not be still. At the Hamburg orphanage, she had learned to twist fabric the way other girls twisted hair, so fear had something to do with itself. She watched the block letters on the paper as if the ink might drip and reveal the trick beneath. Ingrid studied the rules like a timetable, not with trust but with that teacher's hunger for order that can be counted. She did not move until she had translated each clause twice. A second soldier, younger, cleared his throat and announced they would be taken to a processing camp. His voice landed like a shy guest. He spoke, and then he truly waited. No hurry, no hurting, no hands where they did not belong. The women gathered their thin bundles in a quiet that felt almost like pretending, rehearsing how free people might behave when offered a choice. The truck's canvas did not stink of what Greta expected. It smelled of wind and starch, and the boards beneath her held a steady patience. The young soldier offered his palm up, like an apple to a skittish horse. When Liesel flinched back, he did not insist. He set a wooden crate by the tailgate, gave a small nod that said, "For you," and stepped away until he was only a shape without edges. They sat shoulder to shoulder in the formation they had invented years ago. Greta on the outside to break the first weather. Liesel in the middle where warmth gathered. Ingrid on the aisle where words might get out. Bavaria rolled past in long green lines as if the ground refused the lesson of war. A spire caught sun. A hedge kept its habit. The world looked exactly like itself, which felt like provocation. At the gate, 2 guards checked a list and looked into the truck. Not at cheeks, not at hair, not at what men had always counted first. They were looking for something else, and Greta didn't yet have a word for it. One tipped his cap as if greeting customers. The muscles around Greta's mouth tried the shape of something that was not a smile, and not its opposite. It stayed, waiting to learn its name. They were assigned to a barracks bearing a new number. 6 cots, 2 neat rows, a folded blanket on each. Greta pressed 2 fingers into the wool. Clean softness has weight. On a crate by the bed sat a tin cup and a small cake of soap, wrapped in brown paper with a string that tied neatly and did not lie. She unwound the string and passed the soap to Liesel, who sniffed it like a child in a stranger's garden, eyes first, then nose, then the reluctance of joy. Morrison, that was the officer's name, returned at dusk. He said the rules aloud in German, not because the paper had changed, but because speaking makes things heavier. If anyone violates these, he tapped the placard with a knuckle. They answer to me first. It sounded like a threat, but carried the temperature of a promise. Ingrid gave a small professional nod, as if the correct solution had finally appeared on the board. "One more," he added. "If you need anything, ask. You do not owe anything for asking." Debt had been the currency of their old world. The idea that a question could be just a question loosened something in Greta's chest she had not dared name as tight. The camp did not fall asleep. It decrescendoed. Voices dimmed. Card games sighed. A laugh rose without an edge and died without an echo. For years the women had measured danger by the noises men made in the dark. Tonight they listened for absences. The lurch of a door, the scramble of feet, the groan that never came. "Do you think they mean it?" Liesl whispered into the blanket, as if a louder voice might spook the rules from the wall. "We will see," Ingrid said, "because teachers know belief is not taught. It is demonstrated until it feels like fact." Morning brought 2 polite knocks, a breath between. A young soldier announced breakfast in German that blushed on his tongue. The tray rested just beyond the threshold. Bowls, bread, a kitchen smell instead of a corridor smell. He stepped back, palms open, eyes brief. They ate with the careful silence of people trying not to disturb a good thing. The bread cracked where bread should crack. The broth held steady heat. When finished, Ingrid aligned the spoons because order deserves to be met with order. Near noon they heard the cook before seeing him, a low hum, off-key and friendly to itself. He placed the tray inside and retreated, transformation complete. A man turning into a shadow that respected walls. Meat sat on the plate, not scraps. Not the grisly apology of hard months. A portion cooked the way a person cooks for a person. "Is this?" Liesl began, then stopped as if the word might break the spell that put it there. Greta used the knife to divide it into 3 near equal parts. The knife clicked and fell quiet. They ate like the newly spared. No one asked a price. The door stayed a door and not a mouth. After Greta's shoulder spoke up the way a child finally asks to be carried after behaving all morning. She rolled it and stopped. Ingrid saw, waited for the room to settle, then picked up the Red Cross note and held it out like a cup of water. "If the rule on the wall is true," she said, "this one might be true too." Greta would have preferred a private bravery, the kind that costs more than it gives. She nodded instead. Liesl stood quickly, as if speed alone could secure the permission they had not asked for until now. Paths met at right angles. Signs spoke in block letters that did not pretend to be friendly and did not need to be cruel. The Red Cross on Building 12 wore its purpose plainly. Inside, the air had the cleaned metal smell of a place where hands are washed more often than stories are told. The medic was compact, his face a map of focus mistaken by many for sternness. "I'm Corporal Chin," he said in German that fit the room. "How may I help?" Help. Not what is wrong with you. Not show me, not lie down. As if the injury belonged to Greta, and the choosing belonged to her as well. Greta told the part of the truth that could be treated. Heat under skin, tug when lifting, thin sleep on the wrong side. He listened like one listens to a language one respects. "I will need to examine the area," he said. "Is that acceptable to you?" She said yes. He repeated the yes as though filing it among the instruments. Antiseptic, bandage, powder. He named each before it touched her life. When the solution stung, he warned and waited for her breath to flatten. The sting did what stings do and then left. He worked with the unhurried accuracy of a man fixing a clock for someone who intends to keep time. "The infection is localized," he said. "This is good. Change daily. Keep dry. If red lines appear, if fever comes, find me." No speech about luck or strength or bravery. He packed supplies into a brown paper packet and wrote her name carefully upon it, letter by letter, making ownership an act, not an assumption. When he handed it over, his fingers remained his own. Ingrid asked about letters then, the question that had paced behind her teeth all morning. Chin slid a form and pencil forward. "The Red Cross will carry inquiries, names, last known places, any dates you remember." He did not look at the clock while she wrote her son's names with a steadiness that tried to persuade the world to agree. On the way back, the numbers on the doors looked calm in their frames. A man pushed a wheelbarrow and tipped his cap to nothing in particular. The sky remembered how to be blue where the clouds allowed. Liesl counted steps and realized she had passed the place where she usually lost track from looking back. Dusk sent Morrison once more. He asked after the placard, after the room, after whether anyone had bothered them. He did not ask for gratitude. He laid a small stack of envelopes on the crate. "The mail leaves every other day," he said. "Tomorrow there will be film arriving from the east. It is difficult to watch. Some men will not handle it well at first. If anyone speaks unkindly, send for me. The rules do not bend because feelings are strong." It was a strange kindness, like an umbrella before rain. After he left, they let quiet have its turn. Fear came faithful and familiar. Suspicion followed, precise and small. Then something softer and less obedient lodged itself in the room. The beginning of trust, not a word, but the way a body sits when it is not braced for impact. Night hummed beyond the fence. A song tried to remember itself. Greta closed her eyes and saw the placard printed inside her lids, the medic's hand pausing for a yes, a plate that would still be a plate tomorrow. "Tomorrow," she whispered, and the word tasted less like a dare and more like a plan. Morning brought breakfast by the rule book. 2 knocks, an announcement, a tray that came to the door and not a step further. They ate and discovered the body's strange gift, how quickly it begins to prefer the ordinary once the ordinary is allowed. After the tray left, a silence like warm cloth lay over the room. Ingrid, who could not stop being a teacher even when no one had asked her to be, arranged the envelopes by size and said, "We will write today." Greta waited for the ache to argue. It did not. The bandage held its place. The shoulder lowered itself from the height pain makes. When the noon tray came, the cook set down a plate and stepped back like yesterday and the day before. The smell rose and halted in the doorway, asking permission to belong. At mid-afternoon, the reels arrived. They did not enter Building 7, but their rumor did. Film from camps the women had heard about as if they were bad dreams someone else had. The camp's atmosphere changed the way a room changes when a window is opened on a cold day. Subtle at first, then plain enough that no one pretends not to notice. Men spoke less. Jokes died on the tongue. The boy who brought supper did not meet their eyes and managed to look ashamed of his own hands. The next morning, Morrison appeared with a man Greta had not seen. He wore his shoulders as if they carried an older brother and a younger promise. His gaze measured and mismeasured in the way of a person still learning the weight of things. "This is Corporal Sullivan," Morrison said. "He will be working with us for a time." Sullivan nodded to Ingrid with a stiffness that did not come from pride so much as strain. After they left, the room felt smaller, as if someone had closed a door that had been open without them knowing. By afternoon, the young soldier's boyishness returned by half. He knocked, set the tray, and whispered sorry as if to the food. The apology did not belong to them, and so they did not take it. They ate, and the plate was a plate, and the door remained a door. Sullivan came alone the next day. He carried a manila folder that seemed heavier than paper. He asked to speak, but the asking had a hard rind. He laid out photographs, grainy proof of what rumor sometimes dared and sometimes refused to say. Wire, hollow faces, a trench that had never been a ditch. He asked what they knew, what they had seen. He used a voice that wanted confession, not conversation. Greta stared until her eyes felt full of grit. Surprise had no place here. Confirmation did. Evil she knew had pressed against her skin for 4 years. This evil had been systematic and official, and the sight of it made her own survival feel for a moment that she hated, like a theft. "We knew we were nothing," she said, and the words were not a defense or a plea, but a description of the air she had lived in. "That is not an answer," Sullivan said, and his anger climbed its own ladder. These camps were all over Germany. People had to know. Laisel began to shake in that old way that returned to her when her body remembered the floor of the first place. "They told us we were lucky," she said through tears. Lucky to be kept from worse. Ingrid, with her ruler-straight posture, found a voice that did not tremble even when the rest of her did. "We were told we served the right," she said. "That our suffering prevented other suffering. We were told a price is paid, and we were to be the price." Sullivan gathered the photographs with motions that wanted to be careful and could not quite manage it. He left them with a silence that turned into weight as soon as the door closed. For 3 days they moved like ghosts into and out of their own lives. The tray came, the tray went, and they accepted it with downcast eyes, as if gratitude had discovered shame somewhere along the path. Greta counted kindnesses to prepare to surrender them. The blanket, the bandage, the door that did not open uninvited. Each felt like a coin she should hand back for having lived through a ledger others had not. Lysel retreated into the quiet rocking that had saved her once and charged a toll each time. Ingrid stared at the placard until the letters almost swam and said to no one, "Rules are a way to teach a future how to behave." On the fourth morning, Morrison returned with Sullivan standing behind him like a witness. Morrison's face held what happens when a man chooses to stand between two truths, strong enough to bruise. He set a document on the crate, kept one hand on it as if words could take flight. "What happened in those camps," he said quietly, "is not on you. What happened to you is not on you either." He turned to Sullivan. "These women survived what we are here to end. That makes them evidence, not enemy." Sullivan's face altered as if a single hinge inside had finally found oil. He looked at Greta and did not see a nation or a verdict. He saw a woman whose 19th year had been taken and stretched into 4. "How old were you?" he asked, the accusation rinsed out of his voice. 19, Greta said, and for a moment she heard the number as if someone else had spoken it. Too small, too large, too sharply edged to belong to a human throat. Sullivan closed his eyes. When he opened them, he extended a hand not to take her up and place her somewhere, but to offer balance as she stood where she chose. "I'm sorry," he said. "My brother died fighting this. I thought anger would honor him, but he would want me to do right by you, not hurt you more." Morrison lifted the document at last. Not charges. Not condemnation. Red Cross forms. Repatriation. "We have located Ingrid's sons," he said, and the careful composure in the room broke where it needed to. "They are alive in Munich and asking for their mother." Ingrid wept as if a door had opened inward where a wall had always been. Lysel reached for her hand, and for the first time in days, her face made a shape that did not belong to terror. The mail went out the next morning and took with it letters whose ink pressed so hard it almost tore the paper. The medic changed the bandage and did not remark upon tears he pretended not to see. The cook set down a plate and said nothing to the food. The young soldier delivered the tray and remembered to smile the way a boy does when he understands that a thing has been restored and cannot say. How Greta stood again, at the line on the floor where permission begins. The door had stayed honest. The placard had not peeled its ink at night. Rules had held, not because paper is magic, but because someone chose to keep them and someone else chose to answer for them. She ran a finger along the paper, not to test whether it was real, but to thank the fibers for agreeing to carry the weight of 3 sentences that should not have needed to be written, and yet saved lives just by being true. Sullivan returned alone that afternoon, without the folder this time. He was a man unused to saying "I was wrong," and learning to do it in a language not his own. "There is a thing I must tell you," he said. "I saw the film and I saw something in myself that I do not wish to keep. I will not trouble you again unless you call." He nodded once, and the nod said, "I will stand over there so you may walk here without stepping around me." Days arranged themselves like stacked plates, manageable, useful, each holding a small portion of normal. Ingrid wrote, folded, rewrote, addressed. Lysel practiced the act of letting her hands rest. Greta changed her bandage and discovered that skin is a remarkable student when the lesson is safety. The ache softened to usefulness. The shoulder remembered work that did not mean endurance. One morning brought a stamp on paper that mattered more than any medal. Confirmation that the boys were in Munich and in the care of people who remembered to ask permission before touching children's shoulders. A date was set for transfer to a repatriation center. The announcement did not feel like being moved. It felt like being allowed to go. Morrison stood in the doorway on their last evening as he had the first, and did not cross until invited. "Before you go," he said, "keep this." He lifted the placard from the wall and replaced it with another already printed, because rules must stay where they do their work. He rolled the first one carefully, tied it with a string, and held it out. "You may find a wall for it someday." Greta took the rolled paper. It had the weight of a small flag and the humility of a recipe. "We will find a wall," she said. She meant a kitchen maybe, or a front hall, or a school where Ingrid might one day stand in actual chalk dust and tell children that the world can be taught to behave. They slept between blankets that had learned their names. Dawn came by the book. A pale stripe, a bird that had no orders, a bell that cared only what hour it was. They walked to the gate with a soldier who knew where to walk and where not to, and at the gate he stopped and did not follow. There was a road with spring on both sides. Not a promise exactly. Promises had done their harm, but a possibility set in wood and earth and sun. They stood a moment at the edge of it, 3 women who had been told they were nothing and had survived nonetheless. 3 witnesses to a peculiar mercy that had looked like clean wool, like visible hands, like a knock that waited for yes. Tell people what you saw, Morrison had said. Tell them some of us remembered you were human when the world forgot. Greta looked at the rolled placard in her hands, at the road, at the simple future of steps taken one after the other. She thought of all the things they would have to unlearn, and all the things they would have to learn in their place. That a door can be a line of safety. That asking is not weakness. That food can arrive without debt attached. If this is what freedom is, she thought, it has rules on the wall and men who answer for them. It has a medic who waits for a yes. It has a cook who sets down a plate and steps back. It has paper that crosses countries to gather families like sheep someone bothered to count properly. It has a road that begins at a gate and does not end at a uniform. She did not say any of this aloud. Some conclusions are meant to be walked, not spoken. She turned the placard in her hands until the string aligned with the seam and tucked it beneath her arm. Liesl squared her shoulders and discovered that her hands could be still even when no one told them to be. Ingrid touched the envelope in her pocket and felt the shape of 2 names become briefly, almost unbearably real. They started forward. No drum, no ceremony. Each step an agreement between foot and ground. Behind them, the camp continued its work of making ordinary things possible, of holding a line so others might cross it safely. Ahead, a road offered space for a new arithmetic, not what was taken and counted and priced, but what might be given without ledger. For a long time afterward, when people asked Greta to explain what had happened there, she found her answers went small on purpose, not because the story was small, but because small is sometimes the only honest way to measure a miracle. She would say, "They did not touch us," they asked before entering. "They fed us as if we belonged to our own bodies. They posted rules and then they kept them. And when sorrow made them rough, they remembered the rules again. If the listener wanted more, she would tell them about a blanket that smelled like soap after years of other smells, and about a bandage applied with hands that paused for permission, and about a placard rolled like a scroll and carried through customs of the soul. She would tell them about a young soldier who learned to wait at a doorway, and a medic who wrote her name carefully on a brown paper packet, and an officer who said the rules aloud as if he were promising them to himself in case he ever needed them too. And if the listener asked what it meant, she would say something simple that took her a long time to say without crying. Mercy is stronger than cruelty, when mercy is not a mood, but a rule, and when there is someone who answers for it. In Munich, on a day with rude sunshine, 2 boys ran toward a woman who had been 19 the last time she heard them laugh. Ingrid braced and then did not need to because their feet slowed at the last steps and one of them asked, without knowing why he asked, "May I hug you now?" She said yes because she could say yes again. Liesl, who had believed that fear was the truest thing about her, discovered other truths waiting like clean plates on a shelf. She could teach reading to children who had learned new alphabets for loss. The quiet rocking left her body the way winter leaves a room. You notice only when you realize you are not cold anymore. Greta hung the placard on the inside of a door that led from a kitchen to a garden, and lined the top of the string with a nail so it would not tilt. Visitors read it and sometimes smiled and sometimes looked away and sometimes stood for a long time with their hands at their sides. Visible, as if remembering something learned once and misplaced. Years later, when the world asked for stories, the big ones threw their shadows first. There were names, battles, treaties, crimes so enormous that language broke on them like water on a cliff. In the space where the echoes hurt the ears, a small story kept its shape. It had doorways and blankets and a cook who set down a plate and stepped back. It had a man who learned that anger without aim is a poor memorial. It had a woman who learned to breathe to the bottom of her lungs again. If you were to ask how to measure a good ending after a bad beginning, Greta might answer this way. Count how many rules on the wall were kept when no one was watching. Count how many times a hand waited for yes. Count how often a door stayed honest. And if you must count something loud, Count how many lives did not turn into stories because ordinary decency did its work quietly and on time. The road from the gate never became less simple. It was still earth and wood and the sound of feet. But in memory it gathered what roads gather, when walked by people who have come from locked rooms. A music you can only hear when you've learned what silence is for. A promise that does not have to be spoken, and the knowledge, a rule now, not a feeling, that some doors open and do not take anything from you when they do. That was the lesson Greta carried, the one she would hand to anyone who asked for it and a few who did not. After 4 years of learning exactly what men in uniforms wanted, the most shocking truth was also the most ordinary one. There are places in the world where the rules are written on the wall, and they are kept, and you are safe enough to sleep.